Welcome, dear community, to a truly special gathering tonight, the gift of Ram Dass. We are embarking on a journey through the life and teaching of Ram Dass, guided by two of his closest and dearest friends, Jack Kornfield and Raghu Markus. And this is a kickoff to a month of insightful conversations from guest speakers and great friends of Ram Dass as part of our upcoming course called Reimagined, the Life and Teaching of Ram Dass. And tonight, Jack and Raghu will be weaving together tales of Ram Dass's life, perhaps sharing stories we've never heard before, if we're lucky. And they're going to illuminate potentially how his teachings continue to resonate in our modern world and impact our daily lives, offering us guidance on opening our hearts and navigating change and finding peace and love amidst life's many complexities. So it is a delight to be here with you all from this global community. We're joining from all corners of the earth. We have people from Illinois and the Netherlands and New Jersey, the Philippines, Australia, Costa Rica, Colorado, all over the place. So though we might not be able to really feel each other in the room or feel the palpitations of each other's hearts as we would if we were in person, we can still create a sacred space together just through our presence and our attention and just the awareness of this web and network of community that we are a part of this evening. So as we do that, maybe say hi in the chat as well. As we dive into tonight's live stream, I want to mention a few logistics. We'll be together for 75 minutes, and hopefully maybe we'll have a brief practice at the end. The first half is going to be featuring insights from Jack and Raghu, and the second half is going to have live audience Q&A. So feel free to engage in the chat at any time. Mangala is on the back end collecting your questions. And tonight's really special because we have this honor of being with Jack and Raghu, and they have this deep connection to Ram Dass that spanned many decades. So let's jump into introductions. Jack Kornfield is a luminary in Buddhist mindfulness practice and has been a friend of Ram Dass for over 40 years. And his wisdom has really touched millions through his teachings and his writing and his activism. He has written 16 books. He said tonight there is 3 more in the works, and they've been translated into 20 languages and sold over 1 million copies, and include some of my favorite titles, including After the Ecstasy, the Laundry, and The Path with Heart, and Buddha's Little Instruction Book, and many, many others. He co-founded the Insight Meditation Society with Sharon Salzberg and Joseph Goldstein, and he's the founder of Spirit Rock in California. Welcome, Jack. And then, of course, Raghu Markus, our fearless director at Love, Serve, Remember Foundation. And he's been instrumental in sharing Ram Dass's message in thousands of ways, including the Here and Now podcast that I'm sure many of you listen to, the whole Be Here Now network, documentaries such as Becoming Nobody, and then, of course, the Love, Serve, Remember box kit back in the, 70s that was. He was the founder of Triloka Records, which featured artists like Krishna Das and Jai Uttal and many others. And he spent 18 months in India with Ram Dass and Neem Karoli Baba. Glad to be here with you, Raghu.
Thank you. It's great to be here.
And then, just in case you don't know me, I'm Jackie. I'm an inner spiritual minister and the director of community and education for Love, Serve, Remember Foundation. And I have the privilege of hosting the Ram Dass Here Now podcast now. And tonight, I'm so honored to be your host.
Well, I think it would be great to start with the gift of Ram Dass. And to that end...
Are you hearing a background voice?
Yeah. Yeah, we're all getting that. So everybody actually hang on for a second. JR, just tell us what we can do, if we can do anything. Because you guys out there, we're hearing...
Ram Dass was speaking to us from the other side, but okay. Carry on, Raghu. And maybe we could start with a minute of meditation.
All right, do that, Jack. That sounds great.
Sounds great.
I think it is gone. Thanks, JR.
Take a breath. Maybe Ram Dass will come back. And let's just let yourself settle, because what we're doing together is really sharing from the heart. And let your mind quiet and your heart soften for a minute. If it helps, close your eyes and take a couple of long breaths. Relax, let the mind quiet. Let the heart soften. And come into the present with loving awareness. Great. Raghu.
Thank you, Jack, for that interlude. Gift of Ram Dass, the gift of Ram Dass. And I've been thinking about it much, and especially thinking about, it's been 4 years and several months since he left us, and getting a realization of how far Ram Dass came from in one way, from the first time I met him, and of course, how close he was from that moment as well. But when he was in Maui, and Jack can really speak to this because Jack and Trudy, his wife, spent quite a bit of time with Ram Dass, staying at the house in Maui. And you know, as Jackie said, Jack had known Ram Dass for many, many, many decades. Same with myself. So we have this view, and that holds Ram Dass in many different incarnations over his life. We were part of it for a very long time, and so then I started thinking, the gift. The first minute that I met Ram Dass, and I've told this story many times in retreats with Jack and so on. The first time I met him, of course, there was this magnificent love, which I got off of the recording they had sent me at the radio station in order to promote the lecture that he was giving at McGill University, which is this Harvard of Canada. And I went over and I met him, and I listened to his story, and you know, the level of honesty he had and the connection he had to Neem Karoli Baba. All of it was profound for me in the moment. But then when I actually went and spent a few moments with him where he was staying in Montreal at that time, yes, of course, again, more love, more unconditionality in terms of, you didn't feel any kind of judgment. But above all, probably the most outstanding thing was a deep trust. This was natural, deep, intuitive trust that I felt when I was with him. And that lasted an entire lifetime. And it was that moment and the moment that I parted with him, you know, a week before he died. It was the same moment. But at the same time, one of the things that happened after Ram Dass's stroke was that he became more of what he pointed to in his lifetime in terms of the teachings and his own life. And Maharaji's teachings, love everyone and tell the truth. he really did embody these teachings. And it was very, I mean, Jack, you can speak to it quite well, being that, that time you spent with him in Maui. And you'd see people coming day to day to the house and interacting with him. And he gave full attention in each moment with every person. And people would egg him on to, hey, okay, Ram Dass has got to go eat or something. He wouldn't pay any attention at all. That giving nature that Ram Dass had, he had from the first moment, but it became ever so present in a way. Can you speak to that, Jack? I mean, in Maui.
Well, I will. I'll get to it. But I love the theme of what we're talking about and sort of the warm-up of this Ram Dass month ahead. Because when I would go out with Ram Dass, whether it was before his stroke or after, when we would be on the beach in Maui for those almost 20 years that he was there, people would come up to him and say, Ram Dass, you changed my life, over and over again. And I think back to his writing and publishing Be Here Now from that yellow school bus where he was living up at Lama Foundation in the mountain in New Mexico. And somehow, you got to admit, it's a weird story. I mean, the cool part of the Harvard professor going to India and meeting somebody who blew his mind after having taken lots of LSD, that part is like, okay. But then he comes back and he's the representative for a Hindu monkey god. Now, how do you, if you had the advertising agency, is this a good move to have a monkey god to be your, it's crazy. I mean, I love Hanuman. I don't mean Hanuman. I'm no offense to this, but it's not within our wheelhouse as a culture. And yet the spirit of freedom and love that Ram Dass embodied with his incredible eloquence, at the same time, and that was there, that poured through the pages of that funny square book with the brown pages of the recipe for a wise life. It changed millions of people. And underneath it, I think there were two things that really affected me. And in seeing Ram Dass, meeting him in 1972, 73, when I came back from the Buddhist monastery, one of them was, I had the feeling that his psychedelic trips, which he'd done, how do we say, many of, probably hundreds, it changed, it rewired him. It absolutely changed him. So from the beginning, he knew what I knew, what, many of you who've done your spiritual practice in all these forms knew, that you're not your body, that you're not your personality, you're not all that you were born into, that there is a reality of consciousness that's born into this body that is actually the consciousness of the world. And that gave him a profound detachment and space to hear and understand and be with all of humanity as it presented himself. So that kind of freedom he had from the beginning when I met him. It was remarkable. But the other part is that he needed Maharaji, he needed Neem Karoli Baba. In Zen, they say, like putting a seal on it to say what one of my Zen masters would look at us at times, we'd ask things and he'd say, you already understand. And there's something about Ram Dass already beginning with a cosmic openness of consciousness and heart, still neurotic, but conscious in this amazing way. And then to have Maharaji look at him with that glance of mercy that sees every part of you and still loves you, which is what shocked the hell out of Ram Dass. Oh my God, he knows everything and he still loves me. This is like, oh my God, this is scary, but it's the good scary love. That second part was a reaffirmation and a kind of infusion of confidence and love that Ram Dass realized more who he was and that he was in the lineage of awakened beings of liberation, which Maharaji, was the beautiful exemplar of. So not only did Ram Dass change all these people's lives through his talks and all the things he did, and mine too, I can talk about that. But he had this space to embody this, and it grew more and more so that he could sit there quietly. When someone would come with tragedy, my child died, or, everything I cared about got lost or burned. And he'd sit there with such tender attention and such an open heart. And then he might say, from the vast place of human karma and incarnation, well, it was their time. What all the thoughts we have, but he had such a trust in the unfolding of the universe as an act of love. And he could commune that with those who sat with him so that we could feel, yes, the joys and the sorrows and the pleasure and the pain, all the things that make up human incarnation. Yes, he'd seen that too. And he'd say, yes, that too. And here we are held in the vastness of loving awareness.
That was a mantra, and that too. In the beginning, I remember in those early days.
Yeah.
And that too. Great mantra. Great mantra. As far as the psychedelics, he used to say many a time, I don't believe that I would have absorbed what Maharaji in the tiniest fraction of a way that we could ever absorb that without psychedelics. And it's exactly what you said. It reformatted enough stuff in him to be able to surrender. And I don't mean, surrender's a tough word. Ram Dass, when he first came back from India, said, there's a few things I can't really talk about. Devotion, words I can't use. Surrender, stuff like that. And, that was the truth. But through these experiences, he was much more, very able to let go into that thing, which the mystery, whatever, we don't know what to call it. And that was a huge thing that he passed on to people, his ability. By the way, a little secret story that I was told at one of our retreats, Jack, when I was with you. I don't even know if you were at dinner that night, but Robert Thurman was there and his wife Nana, and they told the wonderful story. The heroic doses that they took at Millbrook, and Ram Dass used to regale us with all these stories of what they did at Millbrook. I mean, it was extraordinary, absolutely extraordinary. It was Ram Dass that took the heroic doses, is what he said of all those people.
Of course. So when I was with Ram Dass the first year of Naropa Buddhist University, you were there too, Raghu.
No, I wasn't. Unfortunately, I wasn't there. I was having a baby.
1974, and it was alternate nights. Chogyam Trungpa dressed in a suit with a big glass of sake to drink to lubricate his teachings. Very formal, the Four Noble Truths, the Eightfold Path. There is suffering. You have to be willing to face it, and really deep teachings, no question about it. And then Ram Dass would come on, and there'd be kirtan and heart melting, and then he would tell his stories, and and remember, this was like just post hippie time. The room was filled with people, the love and lighters, and then Trungpa would straighten us up, and Ram Dass would say, no, you can actually open your heart and dance. But anyway, partway through that summer, which was quite magic, on the full moon of July, it was some great holiday like Guru Purnima Day or one of the great Hindu holidays. And so Ram Dass said, we have to have a special celebration for Guru Purnima Day. And they built a huge bonfire. And outside of Boulder, you're along the edge of the Rocky Mountains, and there's these huge cliffs of the Rocky Mountains rising, and the other direction is the Great Plains. So there's this huge bonfire that was built, and there's some people chanting and singing around it, making a sacred space. You were invited to go and throw into the fire, to write and throw into the fire the things you needed to let go of. This is following up on that of things, the difficulties, the anger, the addiction, the things that you carried. The thing that's interesting is that before you could throw it into the fire, you had to stop. Ram Dass had like a little station with a tent, and there he was with his beard and all dressed in white in his sort of Hindu guru outfit of that era. And you were invited to tell Ram Dass what it was that you were throwing into the Kali fire. And so there was this huge long line. And I asked Ram Dass, like, what kind of things did people say? And he said, well, there was a lot of sexual stuff, a lot of shame and, guilt. And that was a big theme. There was stuff about families and parents. There was some stuff of, relationships and money and so forth. And he smiled and said, it's all just stuff, let it burn. And he, in that way, embodied in that place. And even those of you who are listening now can feel what it's like to be seen and say, all right, here's the thing that I'm holding on to that I'm ashamed of or sorry about or want to let go of or regret or wish or hope. To have somebody stand there and gaze at you without judgment, and not only with love, but with a kind of vastness that says, yeah, this is your humanity. And that's not who you are. You're part of some huge dance of the play of, loving awareness itself. Yeah. Of course you can let go of this.
Huge gift.
What a beautiful gift.
Huge gift. For everyone, the stories that I hear are the same stories that Jack just expressed from people at retreats, online or wherever. I met somebody in line when I just came back from Costa Rica, and I met somebody in line there and he recognized me from Ram Dass podcasts and all that. And you could see in his eyes what Ram Dass meant to him, meant to me, meant to all of us. And he never even, had a chance to see him physically. He's very young. So it's just that gift. It's that same moment, that intuitive trust that he transmitted was extraordinary. Absolutely extraordinary. I want to say one thing, like we've seen Ram Dass through all these amazing different phases of his life. You can see it through the pictures, the big beard and, what he looked like at Naropa, the Hindu guru look. And, all the way to the straight, sport jackets and shirts that he was wearing more in the late 80s, 90s. But I have listened, of course, being in my role as director of the foundation and never mind that, I have known Ram Dass since late 60s, 69, 70s. So I've heard his talks over and over. So I suddenly was listening to, I wanted to check out what was in this course that we're talking about, the Life and Teachings of Ram Dass. And this talk came on. And it was Ram Dass talking about his trip, getting to see Neem Karoli Baba, going in the vehicle with Bhagavan Das, who had already met him. The detail that was there, I don't ever remember it. Maybe, it's a good thing getting older, you forget shit. But it was amazing. It was, and it was the whole, the story of Be Here Now. Ram Dass just kept going on about his experiences in the past or worrying about the future. And Bhagavan Das just went, okay, can you just be here now? It wasn't any grand thing like it is, now. Book Be Here Now, millions of people. And then how he walked through, you can be in his shoes. It's just amazing how he walked through in Benares. And, every step or two, you're avoiding, cow dung, or you're avoiding pond, this red Betelgeuse that they spit out everywhere. And he's barefoot because he's trying to be part of, what it is to be Indian. I mean, you get the feeling of it. It is so fantastic. It's just all of us. And that was the great thing. And he still continues to transmit that of being kind of the Christ of the teachings. Actually, Maharaji, there's a great story I'll tell it briefly. But Ram Dass, you know, he got sick of us. He was 15 years older than us, about, or something like that, and we were, just constantly at him for one thing or another, taking care of us. Daddy, you're going to take care. Mommy, you're going to take care of us. Being there with Maharaji. And so one time he walked from the hotel in Nainital, it was like a half a day walk to Kenchi, and he gets there and we're all eating, and somebody who he didn't really respond well many a times gave him a platter of food and said, "Here, you can sit here and eat it." He took the platter and he threw it in the face of this satsang guy, right? Maharaji saw the whole thing. He was sitting across the courtyard. So he had us come over and say, "What's wrong? What's wrong with Ram Dass?" Oh, he doesn't like the fact that we're acting so adharmically. He's really upset, Maharaji. And Maharaji immediately called him up, Ram Dass. And basically, this is one of the great stories. Ram Dass, you're angry. Here's a glass of warm milk. That was the that was the prescription. Here's the milk. You take it, but you have to drink it. So it wasn't just, it was a two-way street, and Ram Dass understood that. And then he had him feed all of us some prasad, some candy or something. And then he yelled out, he's like Christ. And I always took that to mean like him telling me in a talk the first time I heard it about his foibles, about being honest about what he was dealing with on a day-to-day basis. That freed me, and it has freed so many people, that honesty about himself, right?
Yes, his honesty, his humanness, and this is really building on that remarkable, spacious, detached, wise love that he lived in, that he was not so identified. He'd say, "Oh yeah, here's my latest, neurotic thing I did."
Yeah.
But it was so clear that that wasn't his identity.
Right.
He knew that. And so that was just stuff. I remember going to see him because I had a kind of near-death experience. I got pretty sick and I went to see this neurologist and doctor, and I got misdiagnosed to, okay, you're going to die this year, probably it's progressing, and your body's going to get weaker, you won't use it well, plus it comes with dementia, and then you'll be gone. And I thought I was sort of okay with death. I'd done all these death meditations and hospice work, and I was okay with the guy telling me that until he got to the dementia part. Okay, I'm going to die. No, I didn't plan on that one. And I got frightened, which surprised me, but there it was, quite scared. And I remember crying when my daughter came in. She said, "What are you crying about?" And I said, "Well, I'm going to die this year and it's going to be dementia, blah, 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 blah." Turned out not to be true. I got fortunately, get a second opinion a week or so later. But I went and I told Ram Dass, I said, I thought it was like, I'd done all my death meditations and I was ready. And he just looked at me and he said, "Oh yeah, I flunked the course a few times too." Mm-hmm. And it was just what you say, Raghu. It's like, we're just human. He's completely willing to be revealing of himself, and with a smile, and saying, "Oh, that's just human. We do that, but that's not who you are. You can remember that who you are is really here to love because that's your nature." Mm-hmm. And that communion changed me and changed people. I was there, going back to psychedelics for a second. One of the times we were in Maui, Trudy and I, Roland Griffith came to see Ram Dass. And Roland Griffith was a beautiful, elegant professor of psychopharmacology at Johns Hopkins. And he was the main researcher for this new revival of psychedelic research. Stan Groff, my dear friend, had been doing it 50 years before at Hopkins, but then it all became illegal. And Roland picked it up. And there we were in the living room of the house in Maui, which is now the Hanuman ashram, the Ramdas ashram. And you can go there. If you go onto Hanuman Maui, you can go and live they have a couple of little apartments where you can stay and practice and chant room, which is really amazing and powerful, and feel him and all the books around and where he would practice. He's still there. You can really feel it. So anyway, there's Roland telling Ramdas what he's doing, and Ramdas is sharing, yeah, well, back in the 60s at Harvard, we did this and that. And Roland said, oh, yeah, we're thinking of that too. And it was like this beautiful warm hand to warm hand or heart to heart transmission, almost like Ramda was saying, okay, now you get to carry the lamp, you get to carry the torch. And Roland, who's just a huge, wonderful man, looked at Ramdas with such appreciation. And I just felt this love fest of generations being passed from one to another. And of course, it was special with Roland, but one of the things that became more and more special with Ramdas is that he treated everybody as special. It wasn't like you're the major donor or you're the person who knows something. You were just a human being in front of him. And there was that gaze and that heart sharing and saying, we're in this and freedom is possible. Love is possible just where you are, just where we are.
It sort of brings up the question for me. There's a couple of things that are coming up, and one is hearing like how he personally touched you. But in that same breath, hearing these stories of him and his life is so inspiring. But I'm curious for the people out there who haven't met him, this question of why do we keep coming back to him? What's the draw here? Why do we keep coming back? You're speaking to it in some ways. I'm wondering if you could be a little more explicit about it.
Well, I have to say, I mean, we've been speaking to the kind of trust that he engenders. I mean, that's highly, highly important. And we've been speaking about the love and the unconditionality and all. And it's funny because this iconic term, Be Here Now, right? The Be Here Now podcast network. I think there's a Be Here Now beer even or something, isn't there?
Yeah.
So it's turned into that. This is what we do. We've done it with the word love as well, and many words and phrases. But I have to tell you this, and I've told this before, but it was so remindful of the core of his gift especially around what does that mean? Be here now. It starts to lose the presence of what it is. Right? I was staying with him. This is in the summer, about 6 months before he left in 2019. And it was morning time, and I, in my job producing, constantly wired to, okay, what do we got to do? What's next? Oh, Ramdas needs to do whatever, and it's going to be breakfast time, but I don't want to wait till breakfast. This is my unfortunate part of my nature. So I ran upstairs to his room, and he was in the bathroom, and he was shaving. He was shaving in a very Zen manner. I remember it struck me as soon as I came in. The blade went evenly down, and it was very mindful, full of presence. And he put it down. And I'm thinking, Jack, the way that Trungpa might have put down his sake when he gave a talk in a very precise manner, even though he was, completely in another state. Anyhow, he put this razor down and he looked at me, and it was the same moment when I first met him, those beautiful blue eyes of his, just completely wide open and present for whatever was in that moment. Not thinking about, I have to finish my shaving, nothing, not even none of the most mundane, nothing. And in that moment, I completely shut down. My mind just shut down from the processes of all of the what do we need to do next, kind of mindset. And I was with him, and we just luxuriated in this moment, for some time, a minute or two. And it reminds me when I look back at that kind of thing. And I actually said to him after, so you're still into, what did I say to him? Something like, you're still doing this be here now stuff, right? He laughed. But the reality is that he and absolutely allowed for the moment to be completely present. This is a beautiful meditation from Ram Dass. I'm not sure if it's in the course or not. It's not. I'm getting a no. All right. Well, whoever wants it, we can get it for you, but just this moment. And that is a super, super important part of the gift.
I mean, your question, when I take it in, I never met Neem Karoli Baba, but I feel like he's affected my life. Ram Dass affected my life enormously as a colleague and a friend and a mentor in all these ways. He showed me something about how to teach. He later told me I tell too many stories, and I said, Ram Dass, this is the pot and the kettle here. What are we talking about? He showed a possibility of how to commune with love and awareness and
This is when we take
Sorry, yeah. Obviously, Jack's got an internet buffering problem, everybody. Let's see what happens. But in the meantime, Jackie, just in case, as a backup, do you have people posed any kind of questions?
Yeah, they have. And this is Brittany from Instagram. I hope Jack comes back. I want to hear what he had to say.
Jack, are you back?
I'm back. I'm so sorry about that. But that's a time to take a pause. Technology goddess is saying, okay, we're blabbing. Now, take a breath, get quiet. Freeze is just a moment to drop into just where we are. But I was saying that whispered in the ear teaching, you can still get it. You can hear Ram Dass's voice, and he talks about selfless service, or he talks about the trap of believing you're the one who's doing it. You're the bodhisattva instead of actually just letting love flow through you. He talks about wise relationship. Yes, he teaches about psychedelics and meditation, but more than that, he really teaches us how to own our own humanity, and he uses all the great examples of his own difficulties and those who he's known and helped. You can mainline Ram Dass, honestly. You could say, you'll take this course, and then over this year, I'm going to listen to a bunch of Ram Dass, and you do, and it changes you. And the fact is that, not that many people got to hang out with him in person, even though many did, but millions didn't, who were changed by him. And he's still here teaching, basically, completely available to you if you want it, and as powerful as any other medium, just to listen to him.
And I'm sure Raghu would say the same thing, and you probably as well, just listening to the same talks 20 times and often getting something new from it.
Yeah, that's a mind-blowing thing, Jackie. It really is. I mean, and you experience it now, because you're doing some intros to talks, and it is absolutely true that it's like the repetition of mantra, right? You may get bored, and then something else happens, and then there's something a little bit more fulfilling, perhaps. But I find that I've heard this talk a million times, but I didn't quite get that, and now I got it, and it's amazing. I mean, this is over 50 years, I guess, and it's pretty amazing. And the other thing we should say, that I know we have some questions that we can go to, but Ram Dass's commitment to service and the kind of social action that he took is also something extraordinarily valuable and is part of that gift, absolutely part of that gift. And I mean, he went into the streets of New York. Maybe it was Jack. Do you know? Was it Bernie Glassman? Maybe. And he went into the streets, and they were, they basically enacted and took on the guise of a homeless person to experience totally what that is. I mean, he had large commitment in this area, and of course, it's the most famous was what he did, helping create Seva, curing blindness around the world. Uh, so he had a large commitment there. This wasn't about, okay, I think I'm going to go, I'll meditate in the Himalaya and maybe come out once in a while and go around, give talks and so on. So that was a great example, as was his work with death and dying. I mean, the stuff that he did with Stephen Levine and actually Dale Borglum, Ramdev, our friend, is sublime. It's just the movie Becoming Nobody at the end has these beautiful excerpts of Ram Dass speaking to the reality of life, birth, life, and death as one thing rather than the way we separate it out. I mean, he was instrumental with many, many people. He used to get tremendous volume of mail and communication from people who had really gone through awful, awful suffering especially around losing their children. And the most famous is a letter he wrote it's called Letter to Rachel, who had died. And it just, his work in that area was also very much a gift, especially in our society and in the West, where we bury that as much as we can. So, yeah.
And we'll be talking about that in the course as well. But I also want to sort of answer the question as well. What you were saying about service, the podcast that's coming out today or tomorrow, it feels like he just cut through time and space and is talking to us directly today.
Really?
It's kind of profound.
Wow.
But circling back to what Jack said about just listening to him can change us. I want to sort of transition into some of the audience Q&A, if you're open to that. And Jessie Rose on YouTube, she said that she's new to practice and feeling very much on her own, and that you all are these amazing teachers for personal guidance, but wanting more of that personal teacher and how to find someone in this world where there's lots of charlatans and scammers, like finding the discernment for that. Can you speak to that?
Yeah. It's a question people have asked me often about finding a teacher, especially if they don't live in, like, I don't know, San Francisco or India or someplace where there's too many teachers and they haven't spread out yet. It's very hard. And we get sort of the notion that you're supposed to have an embodied teacher who gets to know you. And hallelujah, that is a really beautiful blessing. Sometimes you don't have access to a personal teacher, and you take teachings and you listen to the Ram Dass videos and audios or watch those movies, and you listen to others and you read. And maybe you find some friends instead of Thich Nhat Hanh, the great Vietnamese Zen master, said, the next Buddha would be the Sangha, would be the community. And maybe you don't find, your enlightened or wise teacher, but you make a little group of 6 people that meet once a month or once a week at your house and talk about their spiritual practice and meditation and service and facing joy and sorrow and birth and death. You know how to do this. And if you can find someone, and then the other part of your question is, what about the charlatans and stuff? We're Americans. We know how to shop. All you have to do, it's just true. All you have to do is use your discernment, because people will pass themselves off as, some great thing. Generally speaking, don't believe that stuff. Like Ram Dass, the more kind of human and honest the teacher is and shows their humanity stage and putting on some fancy hat. Feel what it's like in a community. Are people honest? It feels like it's loving and non-judgmental, and it supports one another. Then it's good medicine.
Yeah, that brings up actually satsang very much, is what sangha, which is what Jack's pointing to. I mean, that is what one major part of the practice, part of Ram Dass's, just tremendous commitment to sharing. And as Jack just said, finding a group of like-minded people who have real commitment to being honest and being kind to each other and compassionate and moving together in the way that helps all of us open further. That certainly is probably one of the most important things it is to this day. I mean, I don't think I'm in a place in California where there's real community that has really like-minded community. So I think that's super important. I'll tell you that I'll never forget this. In India one time, Neem Karoli Baba Maharaji had someone close to him who served him for 50 years or more before he died. And her name was Siddhima, and she was a saint in her own right. And she's allowed us to spend a lot of time with her up in the Himalayan foothills. And I don't know how the hell I would have gotten through personally. Krishnadas can tell stories about that as well, in terms of how meaningful she was in our lives. But one day somebody said, what is the best practice to bring us closer to the one, to Maharaji, to, as true nature, all different ways of expressing the same thing? And she said, get together with one another through food, love, and chant the Hanuman Chalisa. That's what she said exactly, which is one of the big things we brought back from India. Jack knows it well, all of us that are here, that she said, if you do that, that will allow you to come into the presence of the divine.
Last thing to add is do retreats. There's twice a year Ram Dass retreats on Maui. There are all kinds of other beautiful retreats that are offered by Krishna Das or by me and Trudy and others. Do a retreat, find a community through that, even though they're not in your area. Or go again, if you want, go to Hanuman Maui and sit in Ram Dass's room and spend a week there, and you'll have plenty of connection. It'll be inward wired, and then you go back and you find your local peeps.
Yeah.
Anyway,
I want to make a plug here.
Yeah, go ahead. I was going to make the plug, but
I'll
make the plug
make the
since
plug.
it's you.
Yeah. So yes to sitting in that room. It is powerful. But this idea of satsang, sangha being so important, we have monthly gatherings, several times a month. We have gatherings online, which is a start. And people come from all over the world, and they often have no one else to talk to because they live in the middle of nowhere, Kansas, or in the Bible Belt, and they come to these gatherings, and people often just like cry with relief because there's a place of like-minded souls. And so we check that out. And then we have about 290 local groups around the country. Some of them are 3 or 4 people, some of them are 50 people. Some of them study books, some of them listen to recordings and talk about it. So go on to ramdas.org/fellowship and see if there's a group near you. And if you want to start one, I'm here to help you get ones going as well. So there's a way that we really do want to continue his legacy by having people come together. And to me, it almost feels like the practice of satsang, the practice of sangha, of how to hold each other and share ourselves.
Yeah.
So, yeah.
Next question.
Okay. So, you were talking a little bit about this idea of the one, which brings me to think of different planes of consciousness. And one of the things that Ram Dass talks about often, Brendan, I think it's McCarville on YouTube, is asking. He says he loves Ram Dass's teachings, but he has a hard time reconciling evil acts, choose your massacre, with the teachings that the universe and all is unfolding perfectly. How do you deal with this?
So first of all, I just want to honor that question and Brenda who asks it, because it's kind of a weight on the human heart. And because we have all this worldwide news and you see the suffering in, Sudan right now, 700,000 women and children fleeing, or you see it in Ukraine or Myanmar or Gaza, all these places, or our own streets. So I don't want to put it way out there, or sometimes our own families. And just stepping back as Ram Dass would, rather than getting into the politics or the social solution of it. He was certainly a great kind of supporter for activists. But stepping back in consciousness, this is the nature of human incarnation. We're born into a realm that has birth and death, and night and day, and sweet and sour, and joy and sorrow, and praise and blame. Anybody not have that? And it's impossible to have form come in without duality. You can't have, birth without death in form. And therefore, what's true for our human realm is that there is both suffering and its causes, and there's also freedom from suffering, freedom in the vast sense that Ram Dass teaches of loving awareness, freedom in the social sense when we act to limit war and to feed the hungry, which is Ram Dass's Maharaji's teachings, to love people and feed them. And Maharaji didn't say, love only the good people, or feed only the right children or something. Love everybody. And that means, and I do it in my loving kindness practice. The traditional phrases are when you visualize someone, may you be free from fear and pain, may you be free from difficulty and free from hatred, may you find love in yourself. I can wish that for anybody. I can picture the most kind of reviled figure on earth and visualize them, may you be free from fear. May you be free from hatred. May your heart have some peace, because it affects them and it affects everyone else. So we don't get to change the dance. The dance is good and evil, and joy and sorrow, and praise and blame. But we get to show up with a heart that's big enough to hold it all. And rather than contribute to that dynamic, we can actually contribute, love people and feed them in some very, very deep and basic way.
Yeah, beautiful, beautiful. I want to. There's one other aspect to the gift of Ram Dass before you ask another question, and that I think I'm changing my mind. I said trust was the most important thing in my relationship with Ram Dass, and of course it was. It led me to India. Otherwise, there was no chance I was going to go to India. Anyhow, again, I think it was the same time I was living with him in the middle of the summer before he left. And I said, you know, and I was kind of joking because I knew in the big level what I was speaking to was ridiculous. I said, why did you tell you Maharaji said, don't talk about me in America, period. And you came back and that's all you did. Just talked about him. Why did you do that? I know that you were pretty proper about how you would do things, and someone told you not to. Someone like your guru said, "Don't do it," and he said, I just I had a jewel, and I could not share it. It's like I had no choice. It was choiceless generosity. Really, uh, that was such the fabric of Ram Dass with everybody. Choiceless generosity. I never heard that term, but I like it.
Mhm. Good too.
And if people don't know, one of my favorite of his many books is the book How Can I Help? It has a red cover, and it's filled with amazing stories that Ram Dass collected and loved to tell. And they're on this very point of how do you help even in the midst of tremendous suffering? And you can do it. There's the helper's prison that you don't want to get yourself into. But then there's the real service of loving people and feeding them in a world that is, that's messed up. But there are ways to make an incredible difference, as Maharaji and Ramdas does in so many people's lives and still does, that we too can embody and carry that, even in the face of difficulty. And that's a huge gift to know that you can't change the world, but you can reach your hand out and mend the places you can touch. You can feed those people. And that makes all the difference. William Blake said, if one is to do good, it must be done in the minute particulars.
Yes.
Yeah.
Great,
And I love that.
great.
I've heard that quote before that you said, and I love that. One of my favorite quotes from that book that I use all of the time is that we work to end suffering without attachment to whether suffering ends.
Yes.
Yeah. Well, there also is this. This is sort of, well, it's very much speaks to what we're talking about, and that is one day there was a war. We were in India with Maharaji, and there was a war that was happening East Bengal and Bangladesh and Pakistan and India, basically. And Ram Dass had this lovely Volkswagen bus. And he went to Maharaj. He said, I think I'm going to take this bus. I want to. Do you think it would be a good idea? Take the bus. I'll go to where where the fighting is happening, and we'll use it as an ambulance to get wounded soldiers and so on back. And Maharaji said, Ram Dass, no, nay, nay. He said, Ram Dass, don't you realize it's all perfect? Now, Ram Dass used to bring this up during retreats. He would tell this story. And we'd always have the caveat that would say, we, in the duality that we are living, in the inner polarization, basically, that we are living, could not understand perfect at all. Perfect, all this suffering and this horrid conditions that are going on. And look at this world that we're in right now. And he said, but at least I understood there was another dimension from which it would be possible to understand what that means. So that's part of this conversation, right?
Mm. It reminds me of this kind of related phrase from Zen Master Suzuki Roshi, the founder of San Francisco Zen Center, where one day he was looking out at the students, all these earnest Zen students trying to achieve Satori or enlightenment or whatever. And he looked at them so kindly and he said, you're perfect just the way you are. And everybody drinks this in, and then he continued, and there's still room for improvement.
Yeah.
And it's beautiful,
Yeah.
yes, there's perfection. And part of the perfection is that you get to make a difference in
Mm.
this turning
Mm. Yeah.
planet.
Yeah.
Let's take
Yeah.
another question.
Yeah, we have several more questions. So, it's sort of related. It's Anniversary '07 on YouTube. Says the most of their experience with Ram Dass has been through the spiritual teachings, but they're curious, how did he let go? What did he do to experience a sense of play?
He had a
Uh,
lot, like, oh, Raghu, yeah, he
yeah,
was
no, I
playing.
was going to say he watched, what was that late night TV guy he liked? You would know. You must have watched it with him.
Um,
No? He liked one of those late night TV guys. He used to sit down with Dasiman, his right hand person, in the little den, and he, you know what he did once? Okay, I was living with him. This is his idea of good fun and taking it easy. Actually, I was there, and it was a major. It must have been in February. So they had the Super Bowl, right? And I had to the Giants. I love the Giants. I had to watch the Super Bowl. So I said, Ramdas, I'm going to watch the Super Bowl. He says, okay, I'll watch it with you. I said, what are you talking about? First of all, you hate football, or you're not into football. And secondly, you're from Boston, so you got the wrong team. And the Patriots he was all about. But he sat because he just wanted to give me company
Mm.
watching this game. Really, that
you
was
needed
it.
it too. Did your team win, Raghu?
Yeah, absolutely.
Maybe it's because you and Ramdas Das watched it. He
Yeah,
loved
exactly.
fun, actually. He would go out in the wall.
Mm.
Oh,
We
wow,
just lost Jack
yeah,
for another second, but yeah, he did love fun.
I,
He's
I
going to
want to.
talk about the water, right? The
Yeah, I
ocean.
think so. But while we're waiting for the technology gods to do their thing, we'll breathe. And I also want to mention that great film, Love and Humor. It's just these sweet little vignettes of Ram Dass laughing and having such a good time, and it comes with this course. So I just
Oh
wanted to
yeah,
mention,
that's a
yeah.
absolutely. Yeah, that's a fun thing. That does give you a glimpse of Ramdas in Maui. Absolutely does. And
Oh
some of
boy,
the
oh boy.
things, yeah,
Yeah,
you
go
were going to
back.
talk
Yeah,
about the ocean, right?
yeah, go back to the water and the ocean, Jack.
Oh boy, oh boy, oh joy, oh joy. He'd float in the ocean and that would be his mantra, oh joy, oh joy. Oh, and he said,
Mm.
oh boy, because he would swim out to the buoy that
Oh
was there.
yeah.
Oh boy, oh joy, oh joy. And it was like his spirit of playfulness was actually almost always there. Yeah.
Mm. Yeah, even amidst very, very difficult suffering, the body suffering. I mean, I would call him, "How are you doing?" And he'd go, "Just fine," he'd say. I said, I think that's a little bit of bullshit, Ramdas, because I do speak to your caretakers once in a while, every day, actually. And he said, well, yeah. And then he'd rattle off all of the neuropathy and on and on and on and on. I said, okay, TMI, that's too much, Ramdas. I don't know if I could handle it. I mean, he absolutely had a perspective that allowed the suffering to go on without him getting lost in it, period. I don't think I ever saw, I mean, anybody who quite handled that kind of suffering that way. And I mean all the way to, almost dying in the hospital. And so I first went over there to get him out of the hospital from a septic adventure that he had. He almost died, 2 weeks in the hospital. This is 2004. I actually got a letter from Siddhima that to a few Krishnas and me and others saying you got to go help Ramdas because if you and give him a real satsang base that he can be taken care of or you're going to be sorry, she basically said. And I went over there with somebody else and blah blah. The next thing came was a house and there he was in Maui. But I saw a lot. I mean, when I got him out, we got him out of the hospital. For instance, the doctors and nurses were all around him, and they said, "Well, Mr. Alpert, we're glad you're leaving." He looked up at them with this look of like he had just lost the greatest love in his life with these people. I mean, just forlorn look, like he didn't. I said, "Well, you got to go, you know, you got to go." And he didn't want, you know, he was so entwined with whoever it is he was with in the moment, and yeah, so yeah, that's another gift.
I would imagine that the answer to that question changes over time, like through different periods of his life. There's a couple lectures that come to mind around him, like playing frisbee, and think in that Gandhi quote of like, "Will your next act be of any use to the poorest person you know?" And like, "Do I throw the frisbee anyway?" He's like, "Yeah, you throw the frisbee." But this sense of humor you see come through again and again and again and again.
Yeah, well, that's his basic teaching when he was asked in the film Becoming Nobody what that was. You know, what's the most important thing that you can share? Love and humor. Taking yourself too self-seriously is certainly an issue. So love and humor, yeah.
Yep. All right, so we have a little bit of time left. I want to get to two more questions. And one is from Tio Glover on YouTube, who asks, we mentioned fear earlier, and just wants to know, how did Ram Dass work with fear? How do we work with fear?
My experience with Ram Dass was that his consciousness or his meditation, which really is an invitation to us, was not to reject his experience. And so at different times, he would say inwardly, "Oh, fear, is that you? You know, I see you, I know you." It's sort of like the Buddha recognizing Mara coming to, give him a hard time. And the answer, the Buddha would say, "Oh, I see you, Mara." And so Ram Dass's first thing would be to say, "Oh, this is just fear." He would not turn away from it. And then sometimes he'd almost thank it. "Okay, thank you for trying to take care of me. I'm actually fine, thank you." Because on another level, he was absolutely fine. Fear is, as Mark Twain said, "My life has been filled with terrible misfortunes, most of which never happened." Right?
Yeah,
And
that's
so
great.
fear is mostly about something that hasn't come yet. It's not really in the present. And for Ram Dass, he stayed in the present. He acknowledged fear. Fear is part of being human. Thank you. I'm okay. Thank you for that story. I appreciate you're trying to take care of me, and I'm fine.
In back in the time we were together in India with Ram Dass, he had a mantra at one time: faith, no fear. Faith, no fear. That was he'd walk around saying that for a couple of days all the time. I just remember. Faith, no fear. Faith, no fear.
But, and there's another part of that, which is faith knows fear, but isn't moved by it. Oh, fear, that's just you. That's
Love
just
that.
that
Yeah.
story.
Yeah,
that
yeah,
fear.
beautiful.
Yeah, that's beautiful. Okay, so let's ask this last question, which comes from Brittany on Instagram, who's asking about your fondest memories of some of your early encounters with Ram Dass. And I'm going to add to that, maybe you can share like an early encounter fond memory and like later in life fond memory.
Well, for me, and I had, not like you, Raghu, in India with him, but I had a number of occasions in the 70s to be with Ram Dass. And he was always kind and he was always interested. He could be critical of me, but it was like helpful criticism, like when he told me I told too many stories or whatever. But anyway, at our center in Massachusetts, Insight Meditation Society, with Sharon Salzberg and Joseph Goldstein, when we started, Ram Dass came and did retreats with us, and he loved Joseph very much, and he really liked taking these teachings of mindful, loving attention and mindfulness. And in this, it was an old Catholic monastery that we had bought to become now this Buddhist retreat center. And in the upper walking room area, there had been a kind of ballroom with a because it was an elegant kind of mansion first before a monastery. And at either side of that were these beautiful stained glass pictures. One was of Jesus with someone's head resting his head on Jesus's shoulder, and the other one might have been like Mother Mary or something very tender. And in the whole place, that was the spot that Ram Dass would walk back and forth and do his walking meditation. People were walking outside and in all these other rooms. And I remember going up to him and I said, Ram Dass, why are you walking here? And he smiled. He said, because this is the place in this center that has the real sweetness. He said, you Buddhists, you're a little bit too dry for me. But here, I get the love and the sweetness. I want to walk between Jesus and Mother Mary and all the, and there was this kind of warmth that came out of him to say, no matter where you are, what you're teaching, remember love, remember that beauty, that connection. Raghu.
Sweet. Yeah, that's there's so many. Oh God. But more of again what his gift is. I once was with him before the whole Maui 20 years or 18 years, whatever it was. And he had given a talk, but he hadn't slept well. He had a lot of trouble sleeping, and he hadn't slept well, and it was very difficult for him. I mean, those of us who have trouble sleeping can really acknowledge what that difficulty really can become. So talk was over, and I was wheeling his wheelchair through the crowd to get him as quickly as possible up to his room so he could get some rest. And as I did that, people reached out. You know, they wanted just to hold his hand, or maybe they wanted an autograph on the book that they had bought, whatever it may have been. And I'm pushing through these people. So I pushed through several until one person got like just about in front of the wheelchair, and I was going to push through this person. Okay, it was like this. It was ridiculous. Ram Dass put the brake onto the actual wheelchair, and he looked at me like I was the strangest person he had ever seen in his life. And he looked at this person and completely did what he always did all of these years, just completely let go. And whatever this person needed, he gave them in the moment. And of course, it was another one of those teaching moments for me that was profound. And that somebody is willing to give themselves up, let go of themselves for someone else, is an emblem of what that gift is and that particular experience. So we're at the end of our thing. You better talk about
That's what I'm about to do. Yeah. So, Mangala was sharing in some of the chat with me throughout this, and someone was saying that they really appreciate this talk. They can feel him here. And I get that feedback in our community calls all of the time. Feel his presence when we're in a room together. And so I'm just going to invite and encourage everyone who's on this or listening to this to dig in and dive deeper and show up this next month as we go through this course together. We're going to be diving into the themes of awakening, psychedelics, presence, dealing with our fear and anger, living with generosity and compassion, just tapping into that heart of humanity, that love and that humor with Ram Dass's teachings. And then we're going to have several more of these kind of conversations. We've got one with Krishna Das and one with Mirabai Bush. One of his caretakers is going to join us. We're going to have a great conversation later with Ramdev about death and dying and aging and fierce grace. So it's really these courses, we get such incredible feedback from these courses. And what makes us really unique is we make them really, really accessible because they're offered basically by sliding scale. So we want everyone. No?
Yeah. No.
Oh, I was like, yes, they. So
yeah, you know what else is there though?
To show up. Yeah.
You asked me to do a meditation at the end as well. Do we have time for a few minutes?
Well, yes.
I just want to say one thing, that part of what we are presenting in this course, the Life and Teachings of Ram Dass, I don't think we've ever presented before, which is we have wonderful excerpts of Ram Dass on whatever the themes, awakening, whatever loving awareness, and so on, of him post-stroke. We actually have a substantial amount of material. So it's great to get the teachings that he was giving when there was all of that spaciousness around the way that he transmitted. And he transmitted essence in a way different way. He still had, I mean, he didn't have the flow of words that he had before his stroke, but he had a unique stamp on those words by virtue of his stroke. So that's there as well, and I think that's really, I'm really happy that we're sharing that.
Great. Yes.
Okay, sorry.
So let me give the link, and then we're going to have this. We're going to go a few minutes over, and Jack's going to give us a lovely ending practice. And so it's ramdas.org/reimagined. Please sign up right now if you can. And we look forward to seeing you because we start on Monday.
Yeah, put it in the chat too, please.
Yes, it will be in all of the chats for sure.
All the chats,
All the
many cats.
many channels. So with that, please, were you going to do some channeling?
So let's take maybe just a few minutes for meditation. So if you would, let yourself be settled just where you are, held by gravity onto Mother Earth. She loves you. She pulls you into her spirit. And relax. Let your eyes close gently if you can, and feel the weight of your body being met by the holding of the earth herself. That you belong on this earth because you're part of this earth. And take 2 long breaths. Let the mind quiet and the heart soften. And now with a mindful, loving awareness, notice the experience of this moment. How our conversation and the evoking of Ram Dass and his teachings and all that has touched you. Notice how your body feels, how your heart feels, how your mind is. Bring a mindful, loving awareness to the whole experience just now. And then as if you could offer a vow of graciousness and gratitude to your body and heart and mind. Say thank you inwardly. Thank you for carrying so much to your body and your heart. Thank you for carrying so much. Feel this loving gratitude. Notice the mind quieting. And invite a release in body and heart. Thank you for carrying so much. I'm okay just now. Just here and now, I'm fine. Thank you. And this is a vow and gratitude. Now turn your attention back toward the loving awareness itself. You are not this body that changes every day and every year. You're not the stream of many emotions of joy and happiness and sorrow and longing and fear and delight and all of the sadness and the excitement of being alive, the play of emotions, but that's not who you are. You're not the stream of thoughts, images, and words. Relax. You are the loving awareness, the consciousness that was born into your body, that is who you really are, the space of awareness. Open and rest in a spacious, mindful, loving awareness. Big enough to hold it all. You are mindful, loving awareness itself. Rest in it. Relax in it. And finally, in this quiet place, let yourself listen or hear or imagine or sense. If Ram Dass had a sweet and loving and wise message to you just now, what would it be? You can know. For this moment in eternity in your life, Ram Dass reminds you, what does he say? Carrying that loving spirit and all that we've talked about, let your eyes open again. Thank you all so much for joining. Thank you, Ram Dass, for being with us still in these remarkable ways. Thank you too. Yeah.
Thank you, Jack. That was wonderful.
Thank you, Jack. Thank you, Raghu. Such a gift to be with you as well. The gift of Ram and the gift of you all.
Treat for me. All right. Have a good adventure for the next day. See what happens.
Okay. See
Bye.
you, everybody.